Hi guys, and welcome to Success4MEETS. I'm here with Dr. Robin Kelly, and it's a pleasure to talk to Robin. He contacted us on our website success4.com after one of the podcasts or interviews we did with Richard Grannon with a fantastic question about narcissism off the back of that. So we're going to delve into that in a bit. So guys, if you're listening to this and you want to get some advice from someone who's got experience with people with cluster B personality disorders, this should be really good for you. But there's all other wealth of other things that we can go into, cellular memory, into epigenetics and how the body works with the mind, and how the one thing that Dr. Gillespie says that's missing from modern medicine is the reliance upon the soul, which I really like that part. So there's so much we could cover, but we'll start from there. So Robin, thank you. Welcome to the show. And would you like to just introduce yourself, just a brief overview to our listeners and audience?
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Richard. Yeah, I'm Robin Kelly. I'm a medically trained doctor from London originally, came over to New Zealand about 40 years ago because I thought I wanted to explore the place, and I wanted a bit of sun and a bit of sea. And so I came over here, and I've been here ever since. Early on in my medical career over here, I started to study Chinese medicine and other types of medicine, other cultures that I felt could add to the practice, because my practice of medicine had been fairly mainstream and constricted, and I felt there were other ways to help. And I've tried over those years to combine everything together so that I can use anything that's important for the person and not rush to medication when it's unnecessary, but use it when it's necessary. And I think I've tried to do that. And as I've gone along, I've written some books to try to convince people that I'm not completely crazy, and especially my profession. I'm still struggling with that one. And I still enjoy what I'm doing, and I've learned a lot about life in the meantime, I think. That's me.
That's fantastic. My question from that, actually, you preempted it there, was how did your profession react to the sort of work that you're doing, especially 40 years ago? I mean, even now they raise eyebrows. For 40 years ago, what was that like for you?
Well, look, in some ways, in the 80s, what I was doing was more acceptable. There didn't seem to be this wealth of sort of focus on what a materialistic science was talking about. In many ways, the pressure has come on doctors more so in the last 20 years or so, and people to do what I have done in my life, doctors anyway, I think are going to be struggling more than I have. It seems to be more constricted, and there's this other world of self-help, complementary practitioners, people doing yoga, meditation. As everybody's gone into that, the medical profession is somewhat retrenched into a more materialistic paradigm, and they're a bit stuck because many of our drugs are being, let's see, I think their time is limited, certainly with antibiotics, antidepressants. Notice all our drugs have anti in front of them. They're never about promoting health. They're all about clobbering something. And each one is going to be scrutinized. And what's happening is the intelligent person going to the doctor goes home, goes onto the internet and says, look, this drug has this list of side effects, this list of effects that I'm not happy about. And I really encourage that, because I create time to talk about that. And that means that person is taking responsibility. And then we can get into what they can do in their lives to mend what is happening to them, because so much of it is of a deep emotional basis. And a lot of it is they're not explaining it. They're not letting it out. They're not sharing it, particularly men, basically. So we start a dialogue that is far more effective than me anteing everything. I don't have to up the ante. I have to sort of listen and be a partner. And that makes it a lot easier for me. And I enjoy going to work because of it.
That's fantastic. And there's
Yeah.
this thing that David Icke says, and I know a lot of people are wary of his work, but one thing he does say that makes sense is with medication, how can something be a side effect? It can only be an effect of the medication.
All you've got is the effects, and there's one effect that they market, and about countless that they don't. So he's absolutely right in that. They're all effects. The body doesn't know this. I mean, the pill doesn't know what it's called.
Yeah.
The body doesn't know what it's called.
Exactly.
And, and there's this nocebo effect, because if you take a pill and you feel a bit weird, you think, great, it's working, but it may not be working in the way you're thinking. And of course, that pill is going everywhere. It's going to your big toe, even though it's sort of aimed at your heart. So it's a very ineffective way in many ways of treating so much. And the big problem comes now is we've got an aging population, a lot of baby boomers. And once you start on one pill, you quickly go into 6 or 7. You get this whole lot of interaction because it's affecting everything. And you go to the doctor when you're older, and all the doctor does is focus on all those pills and it misses you. They're just looking at all this other complexity. Whereas you've had all this amazing complexity in your life, most of it good, but not always good. And that's being missed. So I think there's a sort of crisis in health for that reason. And I personally feel what you guys are doing is the answer, because you're guiding people, hopefully at all ages, but particularly at a younger age, into lives that are satisfying and they're going to bring joy. And once you do that, your health improves.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, what we're trying to do is give people the tools and the ability to answer their own question by figuring it out themselves, instead of giving them the answer that might not be the answer because it's filtering through my brain, it's filtering through my experience. I really don't know. But here's all the things that you could possibly find out that's best for you. So it's kind of like a open forum, a place on successful.com to come and try loads of things out, find the client and the coach that's best for you. The coaching world we found was infiltrated, and a lot of you said in Goodbye Psychopaths, you've got this narcissism that's like a virus, and we felt like it just infiltrated, especially in the UK, the self-development world massively. And that's something I'd like to come on to later, because it's scary to see when you go to these forums, these seminars, and it's full of illness pretending to be medication, tending to be sort of helping when it's actually doing the opposite, and it's kind of celebration of narcissism sometimes. So Goodbye Psychopaths. Let's get onto that, because how did that come about? Because that's quite a jump from the work that you would have been doing in the medical world, and you've got Big Pharma in there, and Big Pharma to me is sort of like a massive psychopath in the world of medication. It's a big money-making machine, and everybody knows that. But they rely on the fact that we're so busy trying to get through one month to the next that we don't have time to look at these things. So Goodbye Psychopaths, can you explain that to us and how that come about?
Yes, well, it didn't come in invited to me. It came in because of circumstances, massive circumstances. I was busy planning a different future in my life. So a lot of this is about how to adapt to changing circumstances. When people come to doctors, we probably do see psychopaths, but we don't pick them. Mostly we see the effects of narcissism, narcissistic abuse, whatever. And I've certainly become hugely aware of that over the last 5 years, since our lives have been changed by a psychopath. I totally agree with Richard Grannon as far as there's a danger of calling everybody who upsets you, annoys you, a psychopath or a narcissist or whatever. I totally get that. But I'd have to say, all my years of experience, I've seen hundreds of thousands of people come to me, never prepared me for a confrontation like that's so altered our lives. Now, part of this, we're being silenced for legal reasons.
Okay.
But so I can't talk about totally the case, or else we'll be even more screwed. Yeah. But what that's done is work as a catalyst for me, not only to understand this condition, but also to help me, because as you know, and everybody knows, is that what happens is they put shame on you through gaslighting. So every victim of narcissistic abuse feels a sense of shame, and it's reinforced by the narcissist that it's your fault.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And so part of this, by going through this journey and me really trying to understand it, it's been very helpful to me. But also, I decided in 2010, I'd written my third book. It had done very well in the States. It won a couple of prizes, and I was set to go and talk and lecture about this. And I was clobbered financially, basically, and my family was. Through I can say this, by a narcissistic corporate CEO of the person who built our house, basically. So ultimately. And we had lawyers, and we found that wasn't a wonderful system either. That in fact, what had happened while I was busy working over 30 or 40 years, this other world had built up. Mm-hmm. I was just seeing somebody each day, every quarter of an hour, half an hour each day, trying to help them. But there's this other world built up. Some people would call it the neoliberalism, whatever it was, that had created this environment where this sort of darkness could thrive. And so I going through, it's very difficult. When people go through narcissistic abuse, it's overwhelming. I didn't know the depths of pain and emotion that I could go through. But I studied very early on. I thought, I'm going to study this. I'm going to understand this. And that way I'm going to regain control. But not only that, I can begin to help people going through this. And even, so almost magically, automatically, people come to you once you go through this. And whether they're having troubles with their parents or their family or their partner or their ex or their boss or whatever, I began to understand a totally other side of the human condition, one that most of us tried to stay away from. And from that, I think I've been able to learn more and help people as well, and to really understand this. And it would seem to be paralleling what you were saying, Richard, about why this is so important. We understand this. We're not blind to this darker side of humanity. And particularly for the generation coming through, how they can basically not only survive it, but become creative. And as you said, it's not just the narcissist you're meeting, it's the fact that it's infiltrated our society. It's infiltrated our communication system, our legal system, our political system. And it's about people regaining their personal power. And I personally wouldn't have understood this without now going through what I've gone through. And I wouldn't have said that a year or two ago. I would have thought that's just some excuse that I'm using. So this is a whole area that I think has become hugely important, that we see through the tricks, the gaslighting, all the falseness, the facade that's out there, so we can become authentic. I think that individually, that's the way I see it.
No, I totally agree in every way. And I've been through a relationship with a borderline, and that's what got me into this sort of thing. And that's how I met Richard's work, and that's how I met work by a lady called Chris Godinez, who's fantastic, Dana Morningstar. These people have helped me a lot, and I've been lucky enough to get to know them as well, and do podcasts with them, do interviews with them, and even work with them in person. But this is an incredibly important thing, because I think the problem being is to wrap your head around the fact that these people exist. Because one of the most important things was told me is, just because you wouldn't dream of doing it doesn't mean they wouldn't. Just because you would feel so bad that it wouldn't be worth it doesn't mean they feel bad about it at all, or even exists on their radar. They almost like empathy has been wiped out in some of these to varying levels. And I met people through the years that I can look back now, I could probably on one hand do about 5 people in my life that I could really say were psychopaths, narcissists, to an immense degree, to varying levels. And meeting them now, I could spot it a mile off, an absolute mile off. Like, to the point, I was a documentary filmmaker. That's my trade. So I was used to watching people and piecing together puzzles. We went to a seminar last year of a group of people got together for self-development, and there's a guy up the front, and straight away I went, not having it, don't like him. He's a narcissist, 100% narcissist. And even when you were watching him watch someone else, because he'd invite people up on the stage for them to do their bit, the show was about him watching them. Look how nice I am, encouraging them. And I was watching him thinking, I said to the guy that I started Success4 with, the founder, I said, look, he's an absolute, bear with me because you will fall apart very, very quickly. This guy is very mentally ill. And he fell apart quite quickly. He was quite a young man. But some people can go on years and years and years with this. And the question that you asked from the back of the Richard Grandin thing was about does it take a thief to catch a thief? And I thought it was a very interesting question. I think there's 2 sides to this. I think that they're and I'd like to get your views on it. They're giving us people like Donald Trump and Bush and people like Oprah, who I believe is completely up there with them. How can you be Harvey Weinstein's best mate one minute and the next minute you are saying how bad he is? That's a narcissist. They're able just to flip the switch. They don't have any allegiance at all and no awareness of how they look in a way, because anyone who looks at that goes, well, how comes you've got your hands, you're hugging him in one photo and 3 months later you're up there? It's absolutely ludicrous. Human beings don't behave like that. But I think they're buttering us up. I think they're almost testing to see how ludicrous of a narcissist they can put in front of us without us spotting it, testing it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I the way I see it is that there's the overt narcissist, the guy in your face, the baddie in the movies, the Bond villain, and they're obvious, they're easy to pick, if you like, and I'd say Trump is in that category. You have to say that, what he tweets is what he thinks. We've got a guy here, Kim.com, who's revolutionized the download industry. Okay. And he's upset a lot of people because ultimately he made it free and cheap for people to download movies, and that would hit independent artists and movies. But the same instance, he's right out there. There isn't a pretense about him. He's not somebody that he isn't. He's sort of obvious. And the problem is that you've got the media who focus on this, and they see these people come up in the news, and you see the newsreader raise their eyes and to the obvious narcissism of these people. But it seems to be, and I mean, the question I asked, I don't know this, but it seems to be that these people are exposing a deeper, darker, more covert narcissism that's becoming institutionalized. Yeah. I don't know if they know they're doing it necessarily. It may not be an obvious conscious thing from them, but ultimately this is what is happening. But people, and I think maybe the next step is that people are beginning to realize that there is a much darker element that's hidden but behind the smiles, behind the propaganda, and are questioning more because they're being fed the simplistic version of narcissism. I talk in my book about psychopaths, and exactly what you said. My problem initially was to put, and why I made mistakes, but they were mistakes that only led to me understanding things more, which is another way of learning, basically, is that I put my narrative or the narrative of my friends or the people I mix with onto the narcissist. I say, how could this person do this? This is almost impossible. Then I realized that what separates the even when you get into the spectrum right into the psychopathic system is that person is addicted to the suffering of others, is addicted to watching the other people suffer. There's a sadism involved, and everything they're doing is just steps to that ultimate goal, whether they earn money or they're in a school or a bishop or whatever. If they are, that is their end, that is their what they crave, what they're addicted to. their reason for being. And when I realized that, and that's horrific, and it may well only be 1 or 2%, but the 1 or 2% in power can affect thousands, if not millions. And that is what shocked me, and still shocks me, because I still have to remind myself that my narrative, or the narrative of most people who do lie, most people do lie, but they don't lie to that end to suffer. They often lie to get out of difficult situations, or they don't know stuff, or they feel inadequate, or, when you're late for work, you'll say the traffic was bad, whatever, and blame that traffic. Well, we all do that, and that's very different from this other scenario. And it is up to the 99% of people to identify these 1% who are totally controlling so many people's lives, and that's probably what drives me to a certain extent now.
Well, it's the same why I got into this. I did do a bit of investigative journalism, and I decided to step away from it because it seemed to me it's almost like the whole system is built out of perpetuating the narcissistic behaviour. So is it a case of you can't get to be a high-level CEO, you can't get to be a president, you can't get to be a power in politics if you aren't at least fundamentally mostly narcissistic, and you're willing to do things that most of us wouldn't?
I think so. I don't think all of them who get there are fundamental psychopaths, narcissists, whatever, sociopaths, antisocial personality disorders, but they have to act that way, and they have to be sort of secondary. They have to live these traits. The danger for them is if you're living those traits and it's not you, and the majority of them it's not them, then they get sick, or they turn to addictive substances because they're not living the truth, or their relationships break down. So it's a very healthy situation, and you can see that in boardrooms all the way. You may well have 1 or 2 that fit this spectrum, but everybody else is a sycophant and ultimately totally dissatisfied with their lives. And that's where I come in as a doctor, because I see people in their 50s and 60s dissatisfied with their lives, and that leads into illness, blood pressure, heart problems, and a general disquiet about them never really living up to what they expected of themselves, ethically, morally, spiritually, or whatever. They may have even lost the skill to explain this. You have to draw that out somewhere. I view blood pressure, interesting, as bloodline pressure often, because they've been driven from an early age into work, which they probably from a paternal force, so that they're going to be comfortable but not satisfied on a deeper level. And then they're drawn into these areas like, I want to be a board member or a director of some company that I don't really believe in. And they end up being dissatisfied and sick. It is a very potent cause of illness, this. And you guys, and I work in a university as well, try to get these people early on to say, to question this, not only in their but in the teenage years and children, to get them primed into that creative mode that they're still in. Just say, never leave that mode of play.
Yeah.
That joy, the excitement, the sense of humor, all that, just don't leave that, because that is your essence.
I have a saying, and I often come back to this: as sense of humor is your sense of humanity. The word humor must come from human somewhere along the line. It's the only thing that kind of keeps you going. That sense of humor. When you laugh, you are in the moment most of the time, and you'll go, and it snaps you back in. Dark sense of humor is one way that I've actually survived a lot of this. This kind of dark, sarcastic. Like in England, we're very kind of dry sense of humor anyway. So we find a lot of absurdities funny, really funny, which I think is a really healthy thing. As you look at the world in this bizarre situation we're in, and you think. They think that the world's going to be taken over. Who would want to come down here? It's like the kids hitting each other with sticks. Why would you want to? I mean, we're all doing the damage anyway. I mean, it's bizarre. We're all related. We're all one big planet, and we're all messing it up each other's life. And I think fundamentally we know that, but there's this other level. Do you think psychopaths, people with cluster B personality disorders, like true ones, not ones that maybe are just a bit lost. I'm sure there's a lot of people in there that haven't actually got these things, but are being. There's another level to it where they've been told this, but they're actually victims. They're not actually perpetrators. They've been told they've got a personality disorder by someone who's actually a narcissist. I was taken to our local hospital, by this person, and into therapy at the. I suppose it was a mental health hospital where this person had been sectioned and told that I needed therapy, and I went into therapy by this person. So there's a lot of people in therapy who've been put in there by people that are actually ill themselves. It's a bizarre situation.
Well, so many people who are depressed are actually the ones who get it because they're sensitive to what's happening in the world. They're sad. They're not, and it's natural, and they are often the creative and the sensitive people. And there's nothing wrong with it. They're reacting very appropriately to what's happening. And we need to support them through that because it can be devastating. It can lead to suicide. But ultimately, it is also a necessary step for many people to get to an understanding of them and how the world isn't great, but they are better than the world around them. Yeah, and that's depression in many ways. So they want to hide away.
React appropriately. I just wrote that down because you're reacting appropriately could be a very nice thing to be able to say to someone. I'm feeling down, I'm feeling tired. Well, of course you are. It's an appropriate reaction for the situation you're in. That could be in itself a relief because it's non-judgmental. And it's the judgmental feeling that you get when the feeling of I'm being judged, but I was put in this situation in the first place.
Yeah, my connection with people is, we use the word depression and it becomes it's almost a medical term now. So, the better words is I'm feeling sad. I say, well, really you're feeling shit. And he says, yeah. And they say, yeah, that I am. Well, let's call it that, because you are feeling like that. And that's not trying to medicalize something. That's a normal reaction to difficult times. And when people are depressed, it's a bit like a dog who's sick. They go, the dog who's sick, we have a dog, and when any animal's sick, they go and hide. They go into their cage and they just rest a little bit. So somebody in this situation says, I've had enough, and they want to go and retreat into a cave or a cage. What we do is say, well, I give them these drugs and go back into it, mate. Go back into that crap workplace or that awful relationship. And you can see on a deeper level, no, we want to resolve it. We want to step aside from this and maybe find another way through. All that takes time. You listen to people. So the words depression, look, it's important for us to identify somebody who's so depressed that they're not functioning, they're not eating, they're potentially suicide. Totally is, and we need to act on that. But so many people we need to have a dialogue with to say, no, you're not crazy. This is. In fact, you're very smart. The way your body's responding, where you're responding to this.
Well, it's a crazy making world. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It's set up that way. I don't think it's evolutionarily set up that way. Somewhat manipulated that way. I think that's becoming quite apparent that it's been manipulated to a certain degree to be that way. It's to be a crazy making world. We're not supposed to be doing this 100 mile an hour all the time. Keep your head down, cradle to the grave, and it's all over with. It's not meant to be like that. But I think another term is people say, I see a lot of, especially in the self-development world, a lot of people pretending to be happy all the time. Now, anyone who's happy all the time, every day, is not very well. I can be all right in the morning, and 20 minutes later, I can feel you're meant to do this. That's okay.
Yes.
And so they go. There were a lot of programs are like, your 12 steps to happiness.
I know.
What do you mean?
I know.
You don't go up the stairs for a bath and never come down again. You meant to go up and down and up and down. That's the point.
It was great. You won't remember this so much, but the lyrics of Paul McCartney and John Lennon. You see, Paul McCartney. There was this. Paul McCartney says, "Yes, I believe it's getting better," and Lennon would come in. It can't get no worse. Yeah. So what? So that was always the counterpoint. And if you look at a lot of song lyrics, there's always this counterpoint of this sort of darkness, and without it, you've got bubblegum music, which never really feeds the soul.
Yeah.
So this idea of happiness, and there was almost sort of a happiness culture, a happiness industry, wasn't there, where you had to be happy. I mean, I my work, I go into conferences where everybody's got a tie on and they're all specialists and suits on and everything, and I just want to loosen them up. But I also then go into some more new agey things I used to, and I wanted to shake them up with a few sort of just a bit of dark humor, just to shake them out of this pretend sort of happiness and squirting holy water over everybody. I was thinking, I always felt a little bit out of place on all these areas. So I think maybe the world is moving into a more balanced state. A lot of great comedies now, the movies are quite dark, aren't they? The dark comedies, that Three Billboards movie that I saw, which is amazing. I don't know if you've seen that one that won the Oscars, but it's really dark. But you can't help, you come out of it feeling so enriched because they're so authentic, and so I think ultimately we are moving into that. Through most of us are realizing that you can be, and humor is so important. I mean, the comedians are the most important people, just like the court jester used to be the most important person. The joker in the pack were the ones, these were the people that were spared beheadings in Tudor times because they cheered everybody up. Everybody else got their heads chopped off, but this guy remained, and that's why humour is so important.
Massively important, and you point out a good metaphor there, the joker in the pack. Isn't it funny now that the joker in the pack's deemed to, when you get it, is a bad thing? Everything's topsy-turvy. Why would that be a bad thing?
Yeah, isn't it crazy? Because if you're playing cards and you get the Joker, it's wow, this Joker can be anybody. This can be anything, This is fantastic.
But it's been built up to be such a bad thing, and it's bizarre. I think comedians are the great unsung counsellors and therapists of the world. I really do. I think when you watch something dark and you laugh, you purge it out of your system.
I think so, and that has become. I think it's become better, and again, it's lovely to see the progression of humour in generations. Sometimes it goes forward, sometimes zany goes back, or whatever. But I think you can follow. I suppose, our conscious growth through. I never said this before. Through following comedic trends. Who knows?
No, I agree. I really, really do. I think that's the humanity of being able to laugh at yourself. I was in the garden with my partner at the weekend, and I was like saying to her, "Look at us doing human things. All us down here doing human things. I'm raking. Look at me rake." I just find it so bizarre that I'm doing raking in my garden, and I'm like, "Look at me being a human." And she finds it odd because she doesn't see it that way. She sees it as being normal. I'm like, "Yeah, look how normal we are doing raking." And I find it so weird. It's sort of like I'm acting like it doesn't feel natural to me. It's almost like I'm playing the part of a human being. And I know. I don't know whether that's quite. She doesn't feel that way, and I do. I feel like it's a game sometimes.
Well, I think you're saying the ultimate outsider, the alien or whatever, coming down and watching us and thinking, what the fuck? They probably what's going on here?
It gotta be.
And the most would disappear. They maybe put a couple of crop circles, it wasn't get them thinking, and they piss off. And it's like cheerio, it's like passing through a station, isn't it? Where it's well, why bother to stop at this place? It's looking a bit. So that's part of a sort of metaphysical out-of-body experience, isn't it? Where you're sort of looking down. This is and it's funny, it really is. We are very funny people.
We're a funny race.
I suspect that's the only reason they'll visit us.
Just for a laugh. Yeah, they've got to. We're like the greatest show on earth, the funniest comedy, darkest comedy on earth. One moment we're sending a man to the moon, apparently, I don't know if that happened, and the next minute we're hitting each other with sticks. And you're like, how can the same people do the same things? It's mental. Absolutely hilariously mental. It's one big panto. It's Punch and Judy show on a grand scale. It's bizarre.
I just imagine maybe you've got a fish in a bowl. They just what's that fish doing in the bowl? Well, I just like watching it.
Just goes round and round. Yeah, I think we've got to be the greatest show on earth, and that's probably why it's called the greatest show on earth, because we are the greatest show on earth, humanity. And
I know.
and then that's where
and there are these borders between countries where one
bizarre.
person battles the other, and you just walk over it, and they all look the same anyway. We're all the same. We're all there.
That's so
I
bizarre,
think,
isn't it?
what's that about? What's that about?
When you go,
We've travelled,
he's
billions of miles, so because they won't, there'll be in other dimensions anyway, and they'll zap in and zap out. But they'll say, what's that about? We can travel all this stuff. What are you drawing lines between, and why are you different that side? And what's going on?
Yeah, nothing's going off. It makes sense. Why do you put these imaginary borders? If you're over that side, you're a criminal. But if you're over that side, you're not a criminal. I mean, you've literally just stepped over an imaginary line. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
But you accept it. Well, I
don't. Wall up.
Yeah.
But haven't you got drones? Can't you go over the wall? Oh yeah, you can. Yeah. So you've got helicopters. So what's the wall doing?
Oh, but you can't fly in that bit because someone owns that bit of flight space. What are you talking about? How can you own?
I'm in there.
How can you own a bit of flight space? What are you talking about? No, it's our bit of flight space.
In here. Tell you. Yeah. Okay. I've never had it. This is great. We may have gone off topic, but I think
it doesn't matter because it's the what we're going back to is the psychopathy of humanity. It's lunacy. Is that you can't fly in my air zone? What are you talking about? Who gave you that air zone? What are you talking
about? It's your air.
It's not your
air, is it? Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It's always made. Do you know what? Really, I said this to Richard Grant a few days ago. Isn't it weird that we can buy pets? You can buy living things from shops. It's like going in there to buy a mate. You don't go in there and buy your best mate from like the mate shop. So how can you go in and buy an animal? I just find that bizarre.
Dogs cost $1,000 over here. The human body, if you break it down, is only worth £2.60 or something. As far as I know, I can never quite work that one out as well.
It's so bizarre. So, what about let's just explain to us briefly about your books. You've got 3 books. Is it Healing Ways, The Human Aerial, and The Human Hologram? Now, the Human Hologram piques my interest. So what do you mean by the Human Hologram?
Right, okay. It's the one before I called The Human Aerial, and it was published in America. They didn't know what an aerial was. They thought it was, I don't know, something flying. So they had to call it The Human Antenna, which didn't really bring to me poetically with that. So I'll start with The Human Antenna and I'll move into The Human Aerial, which is basically that we hear. It was talking about consciousness. It was that we are filters of consciousness, that we can filter in these dimensions and through our senses detect this 3- and 4-dimensional world. But in fact, there was more beyond, and that when we get into a state where we are not overthinking with our more logical mind, we get into a more meditative state or in the zone or whatever, things can happen and we can absorb a lot more information. In that mode, and so that was really important for creativity. It also followed my understanding of Eastern philosophies as they related to health, that we were primarily energetic beings prior to being physical, hard beings. That underlying our physicality and our chemistry was I suppose physics and metaphysics, and so that's really what the Chinese feel and Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine feel, and that the human antenna is that as we go through life, we have challenges and we grow from those challenges by balancing out control system. So either so they will talk about the 3rd chakra being a control area where we are in personal control or not. So, and this is very relevant to psychopathy and narcissism. On one side, there are control freaks and they're more narcissistic, and the other side are those who are the perpetual victims. And that as we go through life, we have to balance these two. So ideally, those narcissists who are sort of further on that side get knocked back through and become humble in their lives and become sort of nicer old people. And the people who are easy meat, if you like, get a sort of a life and get a bit gritty. And you see this with relationships, whereas maybe there's the macho man and the very, very feminine woman, and the man has dominated the woman. But as they grow older together, if they've got a good relationship, the guy goes out, he does the gardening, the raking, and the cooking, and she becomes a bit more assertive as well. And they meet in the middle, and with any luck, they get similar sort of interests, and hopefully they still argue. But there isn't that control system. So what happens in relationships and what happens in our life is that the knocks that we get and the illnesses we get, which is how as a doctor, I see this, actually can drive us into a state of wisdom, which is not just being intellectual, it's actually being wise. And also, you talked when you saw that clear narcissist in that lecture room, you knew, and it wasn't just your intellect that told you that. It wasn't actually just his body language. You feel with your whole body, and the idea is that it's head and heart, and this isn't just sort of soppy metaphysical nonsense. This is actually some science, and lower down your will. So everything about the human intelligence picks up this stuff. But it can't be separated into just simple logic or even watching body language, because these are the masters. The other thing is the masters are the masters of body language. They're the actors. They will fool people with their smile, if you like. So it's the growth of human wisdom, which is human intelligence, and this is going to be very important when artificial intelligence, of course, it's here already. How we're going to work with that, how it isn't going to take over, because the artificial intelligence has amazing memory and it does stuff that we will take a lot longer to do, but it hasn't got a heart and soul, simply.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
We must lose our heart and soul to it.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the people that I've always said this when I was a kid, the robots will take over when you're children. You're like, well, no, because someone's got to plug the buggering thing in, and and that's my sort of, even as a kid, as a child, I was thinking, well, it can't, because the person programming it's probably an idiot. Therefore, the thing's going to be even more idiotic than the person programming it. Sorry, carry on, but that was my thought. Even as a child.
The hint of the term of artificial intelligence is in the term artificial. Yeah, it's not real. So, okay. And there are computers that have made music, but it's plonkety plonk stuff. It isn't it? They could probably dial in some soul or something, but it won't work. Anyway, so that was it. So coming on to the human hologram, I was really saying, well, there's this us here, and we're sort of absorbing and becoming antennae for all this universal wisdom. And then in the early, 15 years ago, Scientific American and New Scientist all came out as, hey, we could live in this holographic universe. And that reality ain't what we think it is, that it isn't this hard reality, that may just be what our senses are telling us. And they had pictures of humans walking through the sort of these fields of fields, and that was all right to a certain extent. And I said, well, wait a minute, if everything is a field and that we're converting these fields of energy, these vibrational clouds, into through our senses, into something that makes sense in the real world, then we're part of that as well. We're not just of physical objects moving through these fields. We're part of this field as well. That's the human hologram. So are we formed on fields? Are we primarily fields of energy of which are attracting basically, are we in this physical form for some reason? And I go into one or two reasons we could be in this physical form, but is there something far beyond this? Or is this just one small aspect of who we are? And of course, that brings into concepts of, is there life after death? Is the consciousness survive death? And also, why the hell are we here anyway in this stupid form, raking the leaves and rocking around in circles, making stupid laws? I tried to approach that. So rather than saying we are the antenna for this information, we are let's say a microcosm of this field, of which we appear in this in this form, this physical form. That's what I attempted to do. But I was devil's advocate. I wasn't saying this is necessarily what it is, but this is the logical conclusion. And if it is, does that mean we're going to somehow belittle our lives here? Is this a bad thing to think about, or is it a good thing to think about? Are there positives and are there negatives in thinking? Will everybody say, okay, let's all jump off the cliff like lemmings and die and get it over with? Or are we going to say, it's pretty important that we're here in this physical dimension. This is pretty special. And actually, when you go through this, and when people go through near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, rather than saying, and it's all blissful, not always, but often blissful, they don't necessarily say, I want to go there. They actually come back and say, hey, this place ain't so bad. This place is beautiful. Yeah. My relationships are important. There's something else important about this. This is how I connect with everything. I'm going to make the best of this, and I'm going to. So most people become altruistic after that, and through this process, I did as well. I thought, well, this is amazing, talking about all this stuff that we're all, floaty fields and things. But ultimately, you become to appreciate the beauty that's around you in relationships and people and in nature. And then, of course, it all changed because I was clobbered by the psychopath. But having said that, I haven't lost this at all. I'm now integrating it all. Yeah.
You can tell you haven't lost it. So it's like Joni Mitchell said, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Well, you've got to. Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing, isn't it? Is that you always look back. And I love the thing about humanity is it's funny, isn't it? You can look back. The longer you get away from something, you can look back kind of fondly on it and find it quite funny. Whereas when you're in it, it can be incredible. But I think humanity actually has a way of remembering the good sometimes, the further away you get. And that, I think, is a bit of a gift as well. I agree with you. I'd love to read your book, by the way, as well. So I'll grab a copy. Where can people get your books from?
I'll send it along.
I'd love one.
On the usual things, the Amazon and the whatever. And they're on there. The first one I've just got in my garage because I bought it back, but you can get that from me. But these others, and you can get online, and you can get or you can get it Kindled and whatever. And hopefully you can read them both individually. You don't have to read one first to understand. The Human Hologram's got a bit more science in it because I'm going into those areas which would be a bit crazy unless I put the science in. And so that's important. I do talk about the dark side, but it's interesting to look back because it was before this happened to me, and I was sort of on the right track, but I hadn't encountered it. It hadn't been my experience, and so now I'm sort of integrating that, and I've had to accept this has happened, like you have, and people who've been in these worlds. And this is part of my a deeper understanding of the human condition. I think this is why it's so important. I think this day and age.
I think it's incredibly important. I would love to read your book. So what we'll do is, before we sign off at the end of this, we'll go through your website and through your social media where people can contact you. I agree with you. I've read a lot of David Icke. I'm actually quite a big fan of David Icke. I don't believe everything he says, but I don't believe everything anyone says. But I like it. It makes me feel like there's hope. There's something else going on. Walking around raking the garden isn't the only thing we got to do here. And I feel like
I like David Icke's sense of humour. I like when he goes this other voice, when he sort of he goes into this other voice of the sort of some sort of what the public are saying or what's happening there. I love that bit. His shape-shifting stuff and the stuff about what was he talking about? Not crocodiles.
Lizards.
Lizards, yeah. I mean, I suppose what he's now saying is that everything we see is our perception. And this physical world is secondary to so much more. And that what we're seeing is only a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum or whatever. So I think there's even in that, some degree of rationality, but it was too much too soon for a lot of people. Yeah. And you could see how easy it is to turn on people and say they're crazy and they're mad, because it hits the very core of their being. And that is, I mean, in my medical practice, I see all people with all different understandings, different religions, different spiritual beliefs, different stages of their lives, and you have to respect all of them, because most of us, I've written these books. You don't know. None of us know this stuff.
Of course,
we're just exploring it, and they're just exploring it as well. Can I say one thing before we go? Because there's one thing that's really important, because since I've become interested in this, I have had people really far out on the spectrum, beyond just the narcissistic, the soft narcissistic side, into the psychopathic side, to explain themselves. And this is very unusual. And I've had a few people come to me, and it never happened before, who are wanting help for this.
Sure.
And actually they're the ones that may well have had huge trauma early on in their lives. It doesn't excuse what they're saying, but I'd just like to explain a shift that one person allowed me to shift into a deeper understanding of what happened. This is a guy from England who was sexually abused in a wood, almost archetypal, isn't it, this, when he was 8. And what happens at that situation, if you are, as a guy or a woman, sexually abused or abused at that stage, you have to separate so that your reality isn't so painful. So you dissociate. And he dissociated into 2 parts. And one of them was a dark part. Incidentally, he was infused with shame. He was told, you must never tell anybody about this. An incredible dark part, which is his safe part. And then the other side was this side that didn't feel love, never felt love, and didn't. And this guy married and became actually a pillar of society and did a lot of good works, but he never got any, he never felt satisfied with that. He never could receive love. Interesting enough, this other side that didn't receive love, that did a lot of good works, he didn't know where to stop with that. So he went on and on helping people. So of course the community felt he was wonderful. But he but he was also very psychic, which was interesting. He could tell by looking at people things that most people couldn't. But this other side was his safe side, and this was his dark side. And he got mixed up with drug running and became the driver for drug runners. And some awful things happened, deaths and things. And he would have no conscience about that at all. And that was his safe side. That was his side that he would return to. That was the side he was addicted to. But he also knew that there was this, and he wanted to be helped. But of course, there are techniques that we can use to bring the 2 sides together. But the one side that doesn't feel any remorse has to start being integrated with a side that could potentially feel remorse. And it's incredibly traumatic for them. Added to that, of course, there were drugs and methamphetamine and various other things, which are, incidentally, the methamphetamine turns people into this side anyway. So that's an insight that I had. And I think a certain number of people are in this situation where that dark side is the safe side. That's the side he would return to. That's his default side, because it's the side he has power and he has no empathy for other people. And it's been a struggle. But I've learned so much from that. And, most of us would not meet people in this situation who can want to change or to be honest enough for this to happen. And although, he's got a very dark past, he's taught me a lot, this guy. And I just wanted to pass that on because he's taught me, so I want to teach other people about that as well. And in the book say there are people born bad, and I'm sure that's right. There are people who are born psychopaths, and maybe we can't help them. But I'd like to think that they can front up at some stage and that we can help them. That doesn't mean we've got to be easy on them at all. And it doesn't mean that they will not play games with us and to say, I'm a victim to all this past. This is the trick which we're working through as well. So I'd like to think that there is room for health and healing for a certain number of these people. And that's not being soft about it as well, because for most of us, we need to get the hell out of it when we're confronting these, when we're in their sphere. But I'd like to think there's another step there.
Yeah, and I think that says more about you as a doctor and someone who wants to care for people and looking for the best possible outcome. I'm sure there is a lot of other elements that go into these people. Some people are born like this, some people become like this, and as you say, there's split personalities, there's shutting things off, and you can see a lot with these people, young kids who get into the music industry, into the film industry, that they're clearly blocking things out, and there's different personality types there, which eventually, like a Britney Spears, just falls apart eventually, because they always know it's ticking and it's knocking in the background. That's never gone. It's just always kept at bay, and then they become just self-sabotaging. They drink and excessively, drugs excessively, sex excessively, which all feeds into these industries that seem to be built on these things. So it's been incredible to chat to you, and we'll have to do this again because we've got so much more we can cover. And also, I'll try and introduce you to Richard Grannon as well. So possibly you can have a podcast or something together at some point.
I'm a great. He's taught me a lot, as Sam Vaknin has as well, who's been in a situation of coming from that other side, and what I love his humor as well. So this is the humanity that we bring to it, and well, it's a great journey, you know. It really is.
It really is. You meet some incredibly nice people along the way as well that will help you across. Have you ever thought of doing radio? Have you done any radio, like shows of your own or anything like that?
I haven't. I've been an interviewee. I haven't been much of an interviewer, although I run workshops and things. So I suppose that's similar. Yeah, I could do that. I'm a musician as well, so
of course.
I involve. I mean, the reason I'm a musician is that I love it, and it's my it really helps me. But it's also my expression. And we haven't even gone into that as well. No, exactly. So yeah, I was thinking of because mostly I'm listening to people. You know, I'm really only gaining knowledge from listening to people. So isn't it wonderful?
But you're sharing a lot of knowledge. You're always going to be a little bit further ahead than the person that comes into this very, very fresh earlier on. So you've got a lot to share. We're going to start a digital radio station next year at success4.com. And it would be great if you would do a regular show for us on these sort of topics as well. You could just send the MP3 in once a week or once a month, and we could put it out.
I'd love to
do it. You can do what you want, and also we'll share all your work. So just before we quickly go, where can people find your work, find your books, and connect with you on a more personal level?
Okay, website Robin Kelly, ROBINKELLY.co.nz, or Dr. Robin Kelly, I think it is .com. Facebook. I've got a bit of Twitter, but I don't Twitter much, to be honest. And I love feedback. I on my Goodbye Psychopaths, I really, the thing about social media, it's about feedback.
Sure.
You know, that's how you get your inspiration for the next video. You get feedback from people. And that's how, and we learn together. That must be the way. That's what social networking is as well. So I'd love them to join and subscribe to that, and that way we just all grow together.
And you've got your YouTube channel as well.
That's the YouTube channel, Goodbye Psychopaths. That would be good, and I've got some music on it as well. But basically that's so important. Because as you know, you never stop learning, and that's what keeps us fresh and interested.
Yeah, and interesting as well.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you, and we'll do this again pretty soon. I'll get this up over the next few weeks. So, guys, do pop over I'll put all the website links below in the YouTube video when it goes up over the next couple of weeks. And also check it out, Goodbye Psychopaths on YouTube. We'll share a lot of your work across the website as well. Some of the links you sent in, I will make sure we put onto the website. And we'll do this again soon. And I'm sure we'll book another one in maybe next month, and we can chat more in depth about other topics.
Oh, I
as
loved
well.
it. And I've talked about stuff today I've never talked about on interviews, I assure you. And you obviously have a way of freeing people up, which is so refreshing. You're great.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate your time. Okay. I appreciate that compliment. And I will speak to you in the next couple of weeks. But anything you need us to share, anything you want to share, please do email in, and I'll do my best to get it out. And we'll keep a dialogue going between us, because we have a lot in common. And I can tell you've got a lot more to you, and you're very funny. And I really appreciate the humour as well, so it helps. And and to your family as well. We'll chat about having kids and a wife, and that stuff's important.
Having kids and how to mend this and keep your relationships going, and the different generations, and that's hugely important. It's hugely important that when we're on these tracks where we feel we're on a particular, we don't get so obsessed that we lose everybody around us, and that's hugely important.
It's massively important. So maybe we'll book that one, and I'll send you some dates over, and we'll go through that the next time and do another podcast.
Okay.
So this will be on YouTube, and we'll get it on SoundCloud and iTunes as the audio as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Robin, you take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.